The BMW iX is here in Malaysia, BMW's biggest, latest, greatest full electric vehicle yet. So in this review, we'll talk about this car's looks, there's no escaping that, but also its fantastic interior, its electric performance, its real-world driving range on Malaysian roads, and this being a BMW, of course, is driving dynamics as well. If, like me, you are considering to go full electric for your next vehicle, this is a really interesting one. Let's go. Okay, let's start with pricing. This starts at just around 350,000 ringgit, and that to me makes it an absolute bargain. As you know, full electric cars here in Malaysia are almost practically tax-free. So compared to the other cars, the other petrol vehicles of the same size, in this case a BMW X5, this is a full 100 grand cheaper than that one. Whereas in most other markets, you will be paying more for the EV compared to the regular ICE cars. Here is the other way around, and by a large margin as well. Relative to what you'll be paying in other markets, here, there's no two ways around it. It's an absolute bargain. Having said that, that is purely in the context of BMWs here, because obviously the tax-free policy applies to all other EVs in the Malaysian market as well. So yeah, compared to other EVs in the market today, the Volvo XC40 pure electric, the Hyundai Ioniq 5, the Mercedes EQA 250, this is over 100,000 ringgit more expensive than those two. But then again, looking at the size, this is 2 to 3 classes larger than those things. So yeah, you do get what you pay for in terms of size. Still on the pricing, 350,000 ringgit gets you the base iX xDrive40 that you see over here. But that's without the additional warranty and service package, which of course you want. That is another 20,000 ringgit. Also, I would really recommend that you go for the higher spec xDrive40 Sport version. That adds on a whole lot of extras, which I think you will appreciate. That's an additional 45,000 ringgit over that as well. So in general, you're looking at a 400,000 ringgit car, which is not a small amount. But for the amount of car that you're getting, I still stand by me saying this is a bargain here, uniquely in Malaysia. Now let's talk about styling. That huge beaver grille has everybody up in arms, and in certain ways I do agree with them. I'm not a huge fan of this look, but I'll give it this. It looks a lot better in the flesh than it does in photos. So while this is definitely a super controversial design, I will say that this is unique, it's distinctive, with a lot of cars looking very similar to each other these days. BMW is going its own way. I guess there's something to appreciate in that sense as well. Plus, having driven this thing for a few days, I get as many stares, as many people turning their heads to look at this thing as I did driving the Mercedes-AMG G63. At a quarter of that price, this, I guess, is a cheap way to turn heads. Talking purely about the bumpers, this base version has a very simple design, whereas the upgrade to the Sport version gets you a much more aggressive design with more pointy bits on the side, sort of drawing attention away from the center grille. I think that does look a lot better, worth the premium on that front bumper alone. At the same time, you also get a much higher end specifications. The lights get upgraded from LEDs to laser lights, and in the middle here you also get a sensor radar system for adaptive cruise control and level 2 semi-autonomous driving. Because yeah, this may be a high-tech EV, the base version does not even get those features. It just gets regular AEB at least, but yeah, none of that other features that's available now on a Myvi or a Proton X50. Now, one thing that I find super interesting about this car is that the bonnet is not designed to be opened at all. So you may think, how are you going to fill up the washer fluids? Simple enough, you just press on this, yeah, there's a small little hole to fill that up. Now, of course, there is a way to open this hood up. It's supposed to be done by service attendants and whatnot. Yeah, opening this up, you can tell it's not supposed to be open because nothing is covered up. It's just so messy. It's quite terrible. But then again, it's not meant to be seen by customers anyway, so I guess that is okay. Now, moving on to the side, if I were to ask you to guess the size of the wheels over here, I think most of you will guess 19s, at most 20 inches. But nope, all of you will be wrong because, believe it or not, these are 21-inch alloys. In fact, these are the smallest wheels available for the iX because the sport version upgrades it to 22s. So looking for tires after this is going to be very interesting. Speaking of the tires, this may look a little bit underwhelming at first. These are Bridgestone Alenza 001s, pretty much the same as the ones fitted to a humble Pro Dua Aros, right? But look closely and you will see that this is made specifically for an electric vehicle. It also has the usual BMW Star certification, so yeah, these are fantastic tires, as we'll see when we drive it later. Next, let's talk about the door handles, which I think is a smart decision from BMW. Here all you have is a hole with a physical latch behind it, and it works really well. I think this is a cheaper way to make a stylish door handle without going the expensive fancy way like Tesla's and Mercedes-Benz S-Class with the self-presenting door handles. I just hope, however, that the electric actuator doesn't sound as cheap as this. Listen to this. How bad does that sound? Now, you may have seen in other videos that the iX is available with soft closing vacuum doors, but unfortunately, yeah, that is not available in Malaysia, not even on the more expensive sport model. So yeah, us Malaysians have to close our doors like a normal person. Boring, right? What we do get, however, is the full carbon fiber body of the iX, which looks really good. Although in terms of weight, this is still a heavy boy at well over 2 tons. But hey, it looks really good. So yeah, well done right there. Another thing that I really like is the frameless doors on an SUV. That is fantastic. Now, around the back, the iX has a very clean and simple design, which at the very least is nowhere near as offensive as the front. But I do get a feeling that the front end and the rear end don't really gel together. It's as if they're taken from two completely different cars. I don't know, do you agree with me on this? Let me know in the comment section below. But taken in isolation, I do love the ultra slim tail lamps back here. When you walk up to it, it lights up in a nice sequential manner, in a welcoming manner. I think that looks fantastic. It's A+ right there. One thing that you may not notice is that this has a wraparound tailgate. By that, I mean the tailgate wraps around the corners of the car. So when you open it up, you'll end up with this huge cutout on the side. This reminds me of Audi SUVs like the Q5 and the Q7, while the backup lights remind me of Rolls-Royces. So yeah, it's a bit of a mix and match situation over here. But hey, more carbon fiber. Really cool. Let's check out the interior. So after the hit and miss exterior design of the iX, I'm pleased to report the interior is fantastic. It looks really good, it works well, and as far as full electric interiors go, I think this is definitely one of the best in the entire electric car industry. It is fabulous. And I mean this both in terms of design, in terms of construction, in terms of build quality as well. It really is top notch. Now, obviously the thing that's dominating the whole interior is this whole screen. This is a 15-inch widescreen. It doesn't get much bigger than this unless you go for those silly Tesla style massive monitor. This, I think, looks a lot better, works better as well. Even the support stands in the back of the screen, that is a work of art, I think. Then let's talk about the construction of this interior. This is a purpose-built EV. It's built from the ground up as an electric vehicle, so it doesn't have all the limitations of having to design for an ICE powered car like, you know, the Volvo XC40 electric, BMW's own iX3, and so on. So this dashboard is unique as an EV. They've made it a lot lower, a lot deeper in. It's almost like an old school American minivan, in a good way of course, and it really frees up the space in this cabin. If you look down here, there's so much space. You can put like a handbag or even a laptop backpack down there. This is a clever use of space. Even the center console over here, I think, is a nice touch. It's detached from the front dashboard, so there's a big space in front, and even then, the construction is really good. It all feels extremely solid. Nothing moves, nothing can shake about. Yeah, so for me, I'd give the interior an 8 out of 10, because I do have to dock a few points for certain things. Let's talk about build quality first. At the top, this whole dashboard is covered in what BMW calls sustainable leather. For me, I call it artificial leather. It's just not the real thing, and it feels it as well. And a lot of things are made using recycled plastics, which is not something I want to see if I'm spending 400,000 ringgit on a brand new car. For the most part, you can't really see where they've put all this weird, recycled plastics, but one thing that I can really see is the window controls over here. This falls way below BMW's high standards. And then there's this funny looking steering flap. Yeah, that has no place in a BMW, let alone a high-end one. And then the indicator stock, come on, it feels so cheap, so clunky. It's almost as if BMW thought, yeah, no one's gonna use it anyway, so why bother? Alright, now let's talk about the screen itself. This runs on the latest BMW OS 8, which is okay. A lot of people have been raving about this thing, saying it's the best in the business. I completely disagree. Maybe it is in cars with smaller screens where these big tiles sort of work, makes sense. On a screen that's as big as this, it's absolutely bizarre how weird the controls are. This is a massive screen. No way does it need this huge tiles. You can fit a lot more things in one screen without having to scroll around. It's as if they've perfected the system for a small screen, and instead of having to rejig everything to fit a larger screen on this car, they've just, let's scale everything up. It doesn't work that way. On the plus side, this does support wireless Apple CarPlay, so all that comes in standard and it works really well. Now this works with the large screen. BMW OS 8, not so good. Now this works wirelessly, so you can have your phone completely unattached with a cable, and there is of course a wireless charging pad under here, so for a full wireless experience. Now onto the audio system, the base version comes with the bog standard BMW Hi-Fi audio system. Having said that, it sounds pretty good, better than branded ones in a few other brands. I shall not name brands, but the one that starts with an M and B. Anyway, if you do upgrade to the sport version, that gets you the mid-level Harman Kardons, which I'm sure will sound even better. So yeah, in terms of sound quality, the standards are very, very high in this car. Now onto the fittings. Like I said, this is the base car, so this is pretty much the worst this car can look. I would definitely recommend going for the sport version because the interior looks a whole lot better. On that car, this entire compartment is made of wood and crystal. It just looks and feels far more upmarket than what it is today. I know Volvo started this whole having crystal in a gear knob with XC90, but BMW has taken that idea and completely ran away with it to a whole new level. The crystals on the BMW iX is absolutely breathtaking, especially on the seat controls on the side as well. Over here is just plain cheap plastic. Have it in crystal, yeah, it's just a whole different level, man. It's so great. Now, having mentioned the seats, let's actually talk about the ergonomics of this car, because it's not great at all. Number one, the seats. I think these are a little bit too small, a little bit too flat for my liking. And yeah, I'm not a very tall person, 167 centimeters tall. So if you're significantly taller than me, I just do not see how you are going to fit comfortably on these tiny seats. Volvo's XC90 front seats are miles away, much more comfortable than these ones over here. And then we get to the steering wheel. BMW has tried to reinvent the wheel over here, but they failed really badly because of this shape over here. The sides where you would normally put your hands, it's angled inwards like that, and to hold it over a long period of time, it forces you to open up your wrist that way, which to me feels very unnatural. And to do that for 2 or 3 hours on end just leaves my wrist extremely weak, extremely sore after a long day of driving. I'm not a fan of this at all. Just give me a normal round wheel, everyone. Now let's talk about the rear quarters, which in general is excellent with a couple of flaws. In terms of space, as you can see, loads of leg room, lots of headroom, so even if you're well above 6 foot, shouldn't be a problem with this at all. But we all know that seat comfort is more than just about the space available. With all electric cars, most of them have the battery pack just under the cabin, raising the floor up. So with this car, you sort of feel like you are squatting down a little bit with your knees up high with a gap under your thigh over here. Having said that though, this is far from the worst I've seen in electric cars. And at least with this car being as big as it is, there's a lot of space for you to lean back and enjoy a few hours of drive at the very least. The bench itself, it may not look like much. It looks like a whole flat bench, but believe you me, it's actually extremely comfortable in the back here. It's so nice and soft, very un-German-like, I would say. But sitting in the back here gives you a nice supported feel overall. Plus, because it's so flat, you can definitely fit 3 adults in the back here, no problem, very comfortable as well. One thing though, I do wish that this car would have a seat recline function for the rear seats, but that's missing over here. It's a bit of a shame for such a large SUV like this. As for rear air conditioning, you've got the center controls over here, center vents and B-pillar vents. Everything is good so far. It's just that right in your face is the entire B-pillar made out of this really cheap plastic. Yeah, again, not BMW standards. Plus there's this right in front of you. This is a small flap for you to install additional accessories like a coat hanger or even an iPad holder. But the cover itself, come on. BMW, what is this? My niece's toy is built better than this. But even with all that, I do appreciate the amenities in the back here. You do get a nice coat hanger in the back here, plus an additional one right there. Good for you to do laundry and whatnot. And like I said, seat comfort is just so good, I'm willing to forgive all the small faults in the back here. One last thing before we go is the electrical button that we use to open the doors, all 4 doors actually. All you do is press this and it kicks open. Now this is fancy, perhaps not the easiest to use. I've had passengers asking around how the hell do I open the doors, but yeah, once you see it, it's very easy to use. And if you're wondering what if the battery is dead, right? How do you open the doors? Then are you going to be locked inside? Simple enough. There is a small manual lever that you can just pull down there. BMW has thought of everything here. As for the boot, the BMW iX has a 500-litre cargo space in the back, and it's a very well-shaped one. It's square, there's no load lip, and it's just as big as the one in the BMW X5. So practicality-wise, it is on par with BMW's ICE-powered large SUV. There's also a big empty compartment under the boot floor where you would normally put your charging cables and whatnot. Pretty handy. Alright, driving the BMW iX is a very serene experience, but let's talk about the numbers first. Start with that as usual. This is the iX xDrive40, which means it is the base model, and it has 326 PS and 630 Newton meters of torque. Now, those may sound like very healthy numbers for a car like this, but if you're comparing it against other electric vehicles available here in Malaysia, it's not all that impressive. See, the Volvo XC40 Pure Electric has way more power, more torque, and even the Hyundai Ioniq 5 has more torque as well, and those both are much smaller cars. It's only against the Mercedes-Benz, or rather Mercedes EQA 250 or Mercedes-Benz EQA, whatever. That thing, it's only against that car that this has mega impressive numbers. It's pretty much double the horsepower or PS. But anyway, numbers don't really tell the full story, right? This car's 0 to 100 is rated at 6.1 seconds, which again may seem like pretty fast for a car of this size. But here's where I have to put it within its context. It's all relative. Now compare this against any other petrol car. This is superb. This is supremely fast. You just jab on the throttle and it just goes. It gets you that kick in the butt and you jump forward. It's almost like driving a mega twin turbo V8 kind of thing, at least in the initial acceleration. But in the context of pure electric cars, it's a little bit disappointing really. It feels like this is a really heavy car with a slightly underpowered electric motors going on. I think Volvo XC40 electric is far more explosive compared to this. Even the Hyundai Ioniq 5 feels much faster than this one, let alone the Teslas and all the ridiculously powerful electric vehicles out there. So in that sense, the iX40 starts off as being a little bit underwhelming. There will of course be the much more powerful iX50 that's going to come to Malaysia very soon. That is going to address all your power concerns. So if you're concerned about power, performance and all that, you better wait for that. This, I would say, is adequate. I guess if you've never experienced an EV before, this will be super fast. But if you have driven other EVs, this will feel just okay. Now, talking about the performance of EVs, it's a little bit different when comparing to regular petrol or diesel powered cars. With EVs, all the fantastic initial acceleration is great, but it only lasts for a little bit, until maybe from 0 to 80, perhaps 100. Beyond that, the accelerative force tapers down quite significantly. So if you're going, say, maybe 120, you want to go up to 150 in a quick bit, yeah, it's going to take a bit of time. In that sense, a car of this size with a 300 horsepower petrol engine will feel much faster beyond 100 kilometers per hour compared to this. But as is usual, what's more important is the actual lower range acceleration. In that sense, yeah, there's really nothing beating electric cars in this range. Now, with electric cars, perhaps the most important thing for all prospective customers is the driving range, the all-electric range of it. Now, with this car, BMW claims that with its standard 77 kilowatt-hour battery, it should give you around 425 kilometers of full electric range. Now, I've only had this car for 3 days instead of the usual 1 week cycle, so I haven't really had that much time to test it. But the time I had with this car, I've taken it from full 100% charge down to 30%, and I've covered 270 kilometers. That's not too bad. So do a bit of math, do a bit of extrapolation. With my exact driving style, I can get about 385 kilometers on a full charge. That's within 10% of BMW's claims. That's not bad. Now, of course, with electric cars, your mileage will vary significantly based on your own driving style, your preferred speed, where you drive it to, what the traffic condition is like, what your load situation is. So yeah, mileage will vary. But for me, for my usage, I got close enough to 400 kilometers. I think that is enough for daily use. Now, on to energy consumption. That is averaging around 18.6 kilowatt hour per 100 kilometers. That is pretty decent. Now let's put that into perspective. To charge this car from 0 to full 77 kilowatt hour charge, that is going to cost you about 40 ringgit in terms of electricity charge. So 40 ringgit, you get to drive around 400 kilometers. You need a very efficiently driven Puro Myvi, or maybe even an Azia or a Beza to match that. And remember, this is a much more comfortable, much bigger, much more luxurious car for the same cost. Yeah, that's pretty amazing, isn't it? But then again, if you're driving a $400,000 BMW, I guess cost shouldn't really be that much of a concern for you. is just, you know, where you can save, it's good to do so, right? Now, on to charging. BMW claims that this has a maximum charging rate of up to 150 kilowatt, but that is only for DC charging. So for AC charging, which is your regular wall box charging at home, it only takes up 11 kilowatt charger. So since this is a rather large battery at 77 kilowatt hour, it's going to take about, well, 7 to 8 hours to charge from 0 to full. But of course, you'll pretty much never charge from 0 to full anyway. Most likely you'll come home with about 30%. You charge it up to about 80. That's going to take you about maybe 3-4 hours. That is completely fine. Now back to the maximum DC charging rate. This can take up to 150 kilowatt, which is a bit low comparatively. Say a Hyundai Ioniq 5 can go up to 350 kilowatt on a DC charging. So yeah, this does look like it's a long way back. But in the real world, especially here in Malaysia, our fast chargers, well, there's only a few of them, and only a handful goes up to a maximum of 150, 180 kilowatt anyway. So, you know, you're not really missing out on much compared to those other EVs. Whenever you do have access to those DC fast chargers, you can get from 10 to 80% SOC in as little as 30-35 minutes. That is still amazing, extremely useful for long distance journeys. Now obviously I'm not going to convince you that this can be your only car, that long distance journeys are actually possible with an electric vehicle here in Malaysia. That's going to be up to your own discretion, whether you are going to want to live with all that extra planning needed for long distance journeys with an EV, especially here in Malaysia where charging infrastructure is still in the infancy stage. But at this range again, most of you will already have a second car anyway, so that's a moot point really. What I do have to address, however, is the battery size of this iX40. It is, like I said, at 77 kilowatt hour, fairly large for this car size, but it's tiny compared to the bigger iX50's battery. That is 111 kilowatt hour pack. So while this here, the 40, is rated at 425 kilometers of range, the 50 is rated at well over 600 kilometers. That, I think, again, is the one to wait for if you have the time for it. That is the thing with buying electric cars now. You get the base version, you get a smaller battery, lower range. You buy the more expensive version, you get a much bigger battery, much higher range. You would think that makes sense, right? You get what you pay for, basically. But to put it into a petrol car's perspective, that's almost like saying if you buy a 330i, yeah, you get a 60-liter fuel tank. That's fine. But if you want to save some money and you buy a 320i, yeah, you only get a 30-liter tank. That's a bit weird, isn't it? But yeah, that is the reality of buying an electric car now. But never mind, let's talk about other aspects of the driving experience of this BMW iX. Now, first of all, since we're in a traffic jam right now, I'll talk to you about the general visibility of this car. On the front end, it is absolutely blooming fantastic. Everything you can see very, very clearly. The A-pillars are fairly slim. I mean, it's large over here, but it doesn't really restrict your vision all that much. The windscreen is massive. The top part over here with all the sensors, it's a bit large, but you know, it doesn't really block all that much, for me at least. And the side mirrors are fairly small, so you can just see through it. Yeah, all that, I've got zero complaints. But however, the rear view, yeah, that I've got a lot to complain. Now, the rear view mirror is on the smaller side, but the rear view out is really small. The rear window is really tiny, and most of the view is blocked by the rear headrests anyway, so yeah, that's a no-go to begin with. The C-pillars are also huge at the back there, creating large blind spots, and not helping things at all are the small side mirrors. I think they are way too small for a car of this size. I would much rather appreciate a larger side mirrors. Perhaps that won't be as efficient in cutting through the air. That's just going to make driving this car a whole lot safer, a lot easier, I think. Because driving this car is a bit of a hassle really, because while other markets can get the BMW iX with rear wheel steering, here in Malaysia that is not available to us at all. So what we have is a large car with a very large turning circle. So driving around in traffic, going into tight city spaces, going into tight parking lots is a bit of a pain. Just driving around in my own parking lot, which I go through every single day, I find myself hitting full locks all the time, and even then this car just barely makes every corner. So yeah, pair that together with the lack of a 360-degree parking camera, it's not easy driving this car really. But having said all that, I'm willing to forgive all that because of just how serene the driving experience of this car really is. It's just so refined, you hardly ever hear anything. Nothing from up front, of course. This is a completely silent electric vehicle. It is silent even by the high standards of EVs. Most EVs you get a bit of a whine coming from the transmission, maybe a bit of the electric motors. This one, 100% pin drop silence. And then there's the tires as well. Like I said, these tires are made specifically for EVs. They've got, extra sound deadening and things like that. So yeah, it really adds on to the whole driving experience. There's hardly any road noise at all, unless you drive on especially hard surfaces. But even then, it's far more muted compared to most other cars out there. I can easily say this is more refined than a Mercedes-Benz S-Class. That says a lot. That applies for wind noise as well. This being a full from the ground up design is not limited by standard normal petrol car designs in terms of proportions, in terms of shapes and all that. It really cuts through the air like butter. So even if you're traveling at higher speeds, 110, 120, there's practically zero wind noise at all. So cruising around on the highways, this is as quiet, as refined as cars get in 2022. It's going to be amazing how much better it can ever be really, because this is absolutely impressive as is. The one thing that I would count against this car is the ride quality. It's just a little bit busy, I think. Yeah, I'm sure it has to do with this car's considerable weight, well over 2 tons. So with a passive set of suspension, they just couldn't find the right balance between, well, propping all that weight up and still giving a decent ride quality. I think the lower speed ride is still about okay. Small potholes are well dealt with, but the bigger ones, the larger ones, this car really struggles to smoothen all that out. It almost feels like this car is sort of under damped with a bit too firm of a baseline. Yeah, you are bounced around a little bit, it's a bit too busy. Yeah, I know a lot of international reviews rave about the iX's excellent driving dynamics, the excellent ride quality, but I'm sure those are with the adjustable dampers available in other markets. We are stuck with a base passive suspension, and yeah, it's not great. It's not terrible, but it's not great either. I would have expected BMW to strike a much better balance, but then again, they are saddled with all this weight. So yeah, I guess this is the best that they can do given all this, 2.5 tons to carry. Now let's talk about handling, because this may be an EV, a boring one you might think, but this is still a BMW at heart. It is still a fantastic driving tool. Dynamically, this has all the fluidity you would expect from a BMW. The way the steering wheel feels, the way everything feels so connected to each other. This is a full, proper BMW driving experience, and it's a quick one at that. If you're talking about carving up corners, this will shoot out of corners much faster than even a BMW M4 can because of the initial immediate surge of torque. So yeah, that is an experience to absolutely savor. But of course, the entire time you will feel that this is an extremely heavy car to lug around. You never quite forget that this is a 2+ ton car to drive around. But yeah, to enjoy, this is a proper BMW. That level of adjustability on the edge is all still there. Steering wheel, yeah, standard EPS, extremely dead, but it's also very direct, much more so than, say, a comparable Mercedes-Benz that I'm used to. This, on a fun to drive scale, would rank much higher than a comparable Mercedes-Benz, Volvo, all that. The one thing that I would give top marks for BMW is the braking feel of this iX. Usually EVs, even the best kind, will feel a little bit awkward when it comes to the braking feel. This one, absolutely fantastic. You will not feel any different to driving a regular petrol car. It's so smooth, it's so linear, the feel is all there. Zero complaints. Top notch. Well done, BMW, for the braking. So that's my review of the BMW iX here in Malaysia. Overall, I think this is a very capable electric SUV, but if and only if you choose the correct variant. For me, that would be at the very least an iX40 Sport, or even better yet, wait for the iX50 with a larger battery pack. That would be a much better choice. As you may know, this is as good a time as ever to buy an electric vehicle here in Malaysia. They are practically tax-free. The road tax is literally free, RM0, and you even get rebates for your personal income tax. So yeah, it does not get any better than this if you buy the EV now. Whether that should be an iX depends on your budget and of course your requirements. If you want a car that is the most luxurious, the biggest EV you can buy, this is it, because this is the only one in the class. However, if you don't really care about all that badge flash, you may get as good a car, maybe 90% of it, for 100,000 ringgit less if you shop below this car. So what do you think of this review? Let me know in the comment section below. Thank you for watching and stay safe, everyone.